Everyone thought the car industry had already chosen its winner. Tesla was dominating headlines. Governments were banning gasoline engines. Every major automaker was rushing toward electric vehicles, like the future had already been decided. But while the world was busy building bigger batteries and faster chargers, Honda was quietly working on something almost nobody took seriously anymore. Not a new EV, not a hybrid, something most companies had already abandoned. And according to Honda's own leadership, this technology could eventually do something electric cars still struggle to achieve: refuel in minutes, travel long distances without massive batteries, and run with almost no emissions at all. The strange part: Honda started preparing for this years ago and nearly failed trying to understand why Honda is taking such a risky path now. You have to go back more than 70 years. Before Honda became one of the biggest automakers on Earth, it was just a stubborn engineer named Soichiro Honda standing in a workshop covered in oil and metal shavings. He wasn't a businessman in the traditional sense. He was obsessed with machines. During the chaos after World War II, Japan was struggling. Fuel was scarce. Roads were damaged. Most people couldn't even dream of buying a car. But Soichiro Honda saw opportunity where others saw collapse. He attached tiny engines to bicycles so ordinary people could move again. That simple idea became the foundation of Honda Motor Company. From the beginning, Honda built its reputation differently from other car brands. They didn't just chase trends. They tried solving problems engineers said were impossible. When stricter emissions rules threatened automakers in the 1970s, Honda created engines that met the standards without sacrificing performance. When people wanted smaller cars, Honda made compact engines feel powerful. Over time, the company developed a reputation for reliability, efficiency, and engineering creativity, and that mindset never really disappeared. Which explains why Honda became uncomfortable when the entire industry suddenly moved in one direction. At first, electric vehicles looked unstoppable. They were quiet, fast, futuristic, and governments around the world heavily supported them. Tax incentives appeared everywhere. Charging networks expanded rapidly. Companies promised a future without gasoline. Consumers loved the idea of never visiting gas stations again. It felt like the beginning of a transportation revolution. But underneath the excitement, problems started appearing. Some were obvious. Charging still took far longer than filling a fuel tank. Long-distance travel depended heavily on charging infrastructure. In crowded cities or apartment complexes, home charging wasn't always practical. Then came larger concerns. Massive battery production required enormous amounts of lithium, cobalt, and rare materials. Mining operations expanded aggressively across different parts of the world. Environmental questions grew louder. Recycling old batteries remained expensive and complicated. At the same time, electrical grids in some regions were already struggling under increasing demand. Utilities warned about pressure during peak charging hours. The more the world embraced EVs, the clearer one uncomfortable reality became. Replacing billions of gasoline vehicles with billions of battery-powered vehicles might create an entirely new set of problems. And this is where Honda started, looking in a completely different direction. Instead of asking how to build a better battery, Honda asked a more dangerous question. What if batteries weren't the final answer at all? The company turned toward hydrogen. At first, almost nobody paid attention. Hydrogen cars sounded complicated and unrealistic. Electric vehicles were simpler for consumers to understand. Plug in the car, charge it overnight, drive away in the morning. Hydrogen required fuel stations that barely existed. Most people assumed the technology was already dead, but Honda kept going anyway. In 2015, they released one of the most ambitious vehicles the company had ever built, the Honda Clarity fuel cell. It looked like a normal sedan on the outside, but underneath was technology that felt almost futuristic. Instead of gasoline or large battery packs, the Clarity used hydrogen fuel cells to generate electricity while driving. The car emitted nothing except water vapor, no smoke, no tailpipe pollution. And unlike most EVs at the time, refueling only took a few minutes. On paper, it looked incredible. The Clarity offered impressive driving range, fast refueling, smooth performance, quiet operation. Honda engineers believed they had solved several problems electric vehicles still faced. But then reality hit. The infrastructure barely existed. Outside a few locations in California and Japan, hydrogen stations were almost impossible to find. Drivers worried about getting stranded. Consumers didn't understand the technology. Governments focused heavily on EV incentives instead. Tesla captured public imagination, while hydrogen vehicles quietly disappeared into the background. Honda discontinued the Clarity. And from the outside, it looked like the experiment had failed. But behind closed doors, something important happened. Honda realized the problem was never the vehicle itself. The real problem was timing. The world simply wasn't ready yet, so instead of abandoning hydrogen completely, Honda did something much smarter. They waited for years. While headlines focused entirely on EVs, Honda continued developing hydrogen systems quietly in the background. Engineers worked on making fuel cells smaller, cheaper, and more durable. Then Honda made another unexpected move. They partnered with General Motors. That partnership changed everything, because this time, Honda wasn't building a strange futuristic prototype. They were hiding hydrogen technology inside one of the most recognizable family SUVs on the planet, the CR-V. That decision mattered more than most people realized. The original Clarity the new hydrogen CR-V looked familiar, comfortable, practical, safe. Honda understood something critical about consumers. Most people don't actually want futuristic-looking machines. They want familiar products that fit naturally into their lives. But underneath the CR-V's normal appearance was an entirely different type of vehicle. Instead of relying fully on giant battery packs, the hydrogen CR-V used high-pressure hydrogen tanks combined with advanced fuel cells that generated electricity while driving. Refueling could take roughly the same amount of time as pumping gasoline, a few minutes instead of potentially hours, and the vehicle still produced almost no harmful emissions. But this only matters once you see what happened next. Because while most consumers still viewed hydrogen as a niche experiment, entire countries quietly started investing billions into the technology. Japan accelerated hydrogen infrastructure projects. Germany focused on hydrogen systems for commercial transportation. China poured resources into hydrogen buses and industrial vehicles. California continued expanding fueling stations. Suddenly, hydrogen wasn't being treated like a failed idea anymore. It was becoming part of long-term national energy strategies. And the reason had less to do with passenger cars than people. Realized hydrogen solved problems. Batteries struggled with heavy trucks traveling long distances. Couldn't always afford long charging times. Industrial transportation needed quick refueling. Remote regions lacked strong charging infrastructure. Power grids faced increasing pressure from electrification. Hydrogen started making sense in areas where batteries became difficult, expensive, or inefficient. That shift changed the entire conversation, because if hydrogen succeeded in commercial transportation first, passenger vehicles could eventually follow behind, and Honda saw that possibility earlier than most automakers. The company's vision now goes far beyond simply competing with Tesla or other EV manufacturers. Honda appears to be preparing for a future where multiple technologies exist at the same time. Batteries for some situations, hydrogen for others, synthetic fuels, and cleaner combustion systems in specialized industries. Instead of betting everything on one answer, Honda is positioning itself for flexibility. That's why the company continues investing heavily in engines, while many competitors abandon them completely to Honda. The engine itself was never the problem. Pollution was, and now they believe they may have found a way to separate the two. Of course, hydrogen still faces enormous obstacles. Fuel stations remain limited. Infrastructure costs are high. Producing clean hydrogen at large scale remains difficult. Electric vehicles still dominate consumer markets today, and there's no guarantee hydrogen passenger cars will ever become mainstream. But that uncertainty is exactly what makes Honda's strategy so fascinating, because history has a strange habit of rewarding companies willing to look wrong. For a very long time before suddenly looking visionary, years ago, hydrogen cars looked like a dead end. Now some governments are treating hydrogen like a critical piece of future energy systems. Years ago, EVs looked impossible to. Now they dominate roads across the world, which raises a bigger question nobody can answer yet. What if the future of transportation was never supposed to belong to just one technology? And if Honda is right, the The biggest mistake the auto industry may have made was believing the race had already been won.